My dad is the biggest goofball I know. I suppose all dads are, but mine goes all out. He takes on the role of a pirate. Because of his life on the high seas, he knows what hardship is like. However, he doesn't limit his antics to just the household. In a busy public area, he will walk across the room and throw up his arms, yelling, "Arg!" as if it's his battle cry. My cousins don't refer to him as Uncle anymore. Instead, he is Pirate Zig. Though eccentric, my dad was able to teach me one thing. In any life, even of pirates, we have the ability to understand the lives of others if we just try. But the sad fact is, many of us don't, and we're quickly losing our ability to empathize with others. It isn't that we don't feel sympathy. We do feel sorry for those in need, but empathizing implies knowing what an experience would be like for someone else. So today we will start by removing the eye patch to look at how we have lost our ability to understand others. Then we can look through our spyglass to understand what it means to empathize, before finally pulling out our swords to fight our decreasing empathy. My dad and his friends are a bunch of scallywags, and they love to talk and gossip. Really, I think they're just a bunch of junior high girls. It seems today, though, that our friendships are morphing from all hands on deck to all hands on the keyboard. A study at the University of Michigan Institute for Social Research found that college-bound students are 48% less likely to show empathy towards others in a society than they were when the study began in 1979. Sarah Conrath, the head author of this study, explained that the students were raised in a world of video games, television, and cutting-edge technology, and it may be those luxuries that allow them to disconnect from society. We've become so obsessed with a seemingly fake world that we can't empathize or even recognize when someone is in need. When TV commentator Serene Branson lost her ability to speak while reporting live at the Grammys, the video went viral in minutes. We clicked and clicked and clicked, causing the video to become a web sensation. But really, we weren't clicking because of our concern or empathy for Branson. Instead, we were intrigued by a health crisis that we didn't think could touch us. We lose our moral filter and understanding because although we may have once been instructed to turn away or give the person privacy, we now just click. In his article, Is Internet Killing Empathy?, Gary Small tells us that by observing an occurrence in others, we have our own experience of it, but at an emotional distance. Instead of feeling concern, our detachment to the other person is reinforced. In her Psychology Today article, Endangered Arts, Kate Bullock explains that we depend highly on facial movements and cues to identify with emotions, and therefore we empathize with them. When our eyes are glued to our cell phones and laptops, we lose even our instinctive abilities to empathize with others. When I tell my dad about a bad day, he pulls out his air sword and asks who I want him to fight. Just as he is willing to defend me, our decline in empathy can be attributed to our own self-defense mechanism. Aaron L. Pincus, professor of psychology at Penn State University, describes that empathy is truly grasping what someone is experiencing. He says your emotional state will move in a direction more similar to the person you're empathizing with. We don't want to involve ourselves with pain if it doesn't directly involve us, which is selfish. While at one time we may have heard rumors of a near stroke or any tragedy and felt pity, now technology allows us to get a close-up view of every happening around us. We start out feeling empathy for every situation, but after a while we become so emotionally exhausted from seeing everything that we lose our ability to feel anything at all. And this has got to change. In the book Born for Love, empathy is compared to health food that doesn't taste good. Instead of trying to truly connect with someone, we would rather go for that succulent power. In a commencement speech, President Obama explains that we live in a culture that discourages empathy, a culture that tells us our principal goal in life is to be rich, famous, entertained, and often these selfish impulses are encouraged. We are in a competitive world where the goal is to get into the best schools, obtain the best jobs, and climb the social tiers. When we see someone in pain, we measure our costs and benefits. We could help, but then we might be left behind. In his article, The Empathy Deficit, Keith O'Brien says that in the hyper-competitive world we live in, Americans are just evolving to focus more and more on what matters most, their own tiny world. If we aren't receiving loot for our good deal, we most likely won't help, which has got to stop. Now, I'm probably no different than anyone else, but we can acknowledge that there is a world out there to explore. It may not be on the high seas, but we can search for the buried treasure of empathy everywhere we go. Luckily, I received some of my dad's unconventional genes. Now, I'm not waving around my air sword, but it did start with Treasure Island. I'm a total bookworm. This year, when a new college prep class was introduced all about books, I just had to try it out. I walked in my first day, and my teacher looked at us and said to the class, "This semester, you will learn what it's like to live in another person's shoes." And we did. Instead of just reading to understand the plots, we read to understand the characters in the plots. For example, when we read To Kill a Mockingbird, my teacher wanted us to understand the civil rights movement, so we visited the Brown vs. Board Museum. As I walked through the hallways and looked at the pictures of people who gave their lives to the cause, I realized something. I was never going to be able to put myself in their shoes, but I was going to try, just like we all should. Then I looked to my other classmates and realized that while a good portion of them wouldn't, there would be a few people who would be affected. Yes, our empathy seems to be drifting away on the currents of the sea, but it hasn't completely disappeared on the horizon. So where has our empathy floated? After all, it is instinctive. O'Brien later points out in his article that empathy is so ingrained into the human instinct that even babies exhibit it, crying when other children cry or smiling when they see a happy look on their parents' faces. He also explains that small acts of empathy still run our daily lives. We don't tell the lady across the street she's ugly because we wouldn't want to be on the reciprocating end of it. And we have to use these small acts as hope. Mark Davis, professor of psychology at Eckerd College, says that he has to have hope. He says, "Imagine if humans didn't have the capacity for empathy. What would it mean if we never gave a damn about what happened to other people? That's almost inconceivable." Most people would agree and use these small acts of empathy as a form of societal self-preservation. By using our compassion, we allow ourselves the opportunity to exist and survive. On September 11, 2001, Doreen Leone was informed that her brother-in-law had perished as the Twin Towers fell, and she and her family were left in pieces. She had every right to be broken and angry over the loss, but instead, Doreen started fighting for peace and trying to connect and help other victims of the tragedy. She no longer allowed herself to feel apathetic towards war because she said she understood the heartbreak of those affected by the tragedy. Having empathy allows us to grasp a situation and to work to make it livable because that's what we have to do, especially in hard times. In the wake of the Tuscan tragedy, President Obama presented a speech at the memorial address that had an overwhelming theme of the need for empathy. In it, he said, "We recognize our own mortality in this fleeting time we have on earth, but what matters most is not wealth or fame, but rather how well we have loved and what small part we have played in bettering the lives of others. It's not hard to put ourselves in the shoes of others. Just as members of the Tuscan community marched in the name of compassion and peace after the tragedy, we need to reach out with understanding and compassion towards others. Maybe we just need to put down the cell phone for a while, or log out of our Facebook account, and go talk to our friends. Instead of saying, 'I don't care, it doesn't affect me,' listen. Listen to your family, your best buccos, even strangers. The only way we can show compassion, the only way we can obtain empathy is to find out how people feel and show compassion towards them." Now our time at sea is almost over, and I've explained how we've lost our ability to understand others, what it really means to empathize with someone, and how we can fight our decreasing empathy. For years, I resented my father's pirate rants. I didn't understand how someone could be so weird with seemingly no real purpose. It was only after I grew up that I understood his message. We can still learn to comprehend emotion. We just have to give ourselves the opportunity to do so. Instead of blocking out our instinctive empathy because it's unfamiliar, We should go out of our way to be empathetic towards others, towards other lads and lassies. And if it takes a pirate to teach me how to understand the lives of others, then shiver me timbers, I guess it's a pirate's life for me. Thanks for listening.